spring, the rebirth of the calendar. Doesn't it feel like that? There are a few redeeming qualities, I think, of the month of March, besides March Madness and the start of spring and softball season. However, I think it might be the longest and dreariest 31 days on the calendar. So I'm calling myself a spring optimist. I'm Dr. Christine Alexander Decker. I'm a clinical endocrinologist at Saratoga Hospital, and again, self-proclaimed spring optimist. I'm here again with Charlie Kuenzel, the president of the Saratoga History Museum, and Brian Boyer, the communications director of the National Museum of Racing and Hall of Fame. Hi, gentlemen. How are we doing?
Good. How are you?
Well.
Very good.
Always good to be with you. So
yes.
Thanks for having us.
So I talk about spring, and month of March, again, is my least favorite month. But if you've turned in before on any of my podcasts, I like to do polls. And so I've polled my family, friends, and contacts to give me a one-word description of what they think of. The first thing they think of when they hear spring. Charlie, what's your word for spring?
Warm.
Brian?
Renewal.
That was somebody else's too.
Oh,
Energy, renewal. So I got flowers, apropos, crocus, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sunshine. I'm right there with you with the sunshine. Spring cleaning, in and out.
I don't know about that.
Allergies. I love the sunshine.
there you go.
Allergies.
Yeah.
I love the sunshine of
That's
spring,
true.
but I don't love the stuffiness of spring.
Okay.
And Dave Patterson, a regular contributor to the podcast, said golf.
Of course.
Is David a real golfer?
He used to be. No comment. I'll take the fifth. I'm not going to get myself in trouble. This is going to go out on the airways.
Yeah.
Who knows?
So comments about spring, they were pretty universal. There was another one, softball, from another softball mom. So today, for my spring content, I thought we would talk about fitness and getting fit and starting a fitness regimen, because spring, people want to get outside. The weather turns warmer, the days get warmer and sunnier, and everybody feels like, okay, I want to get moving, because winter around here is dark and cold. And we don't stop our busy daily grind, except that when you go to work, it's dark, and when you come home, it's dark. So that really cuts into a outdoor physical regimen. And unless you have the financial means to have home fitness equipment or a gym membership, it can be a real troublesome thing. So spring, people feel like they want to get outside and get renewal.
That's right.
However, we need to give people guidance on how to do that so we don't get injured. Knee injuries, rolling an ankle, shin splints. You want to be fit, but you don't want to get injured. So it is scientifically proven that people follow the fitness direction that doctors give can be very helpful for patients. So there are 5 A's of fitness in medicine. I know. So doctors can be proponents of fitness. And so the first A is ask. Ask people about a fitness prescription. So we want to get fit, and we want people to do that because we know there are benefits to fitness. So you can write a fitness prescription. And I said to my family, I'm like, that's probably a harder thing to fill than a pill, is your fitness prescription.
Oh, yeah.
So we ask about people's level of fitness to begin with. And then we assess, what are physical limitations, what are some barriers, and what are their resources. Ambulating, walking, seems like the perfect fitness. It doesn't take much equipment, it's fairly inexpensive, and it's readily accessible for most people, but not everybody can walk. So those patients have a disadvantage, and so we have to get creative about our fitness instruction. Swimming, aquatic exercise, chair exercise programs, cycling, arm cycling, and all of that we can encourage and incorporate into a regimen. There may even be need for physical therapy assessments for some patients because of balance and stability issues. Do they need assisting devices to be fit?
Sure.
The third A is advise. So we want to know if patients are ready to be fit. So that conversation in the spring with your doctor about any physical symptoms. I get short of breath walking to the driveway. Well, that patient's not ready for a physical regimen because that needs to be looked into. I get a chest pressure or a pain when I do X. That needs to be looked into. My knee bothers me, my hip bothers me, things that need to be assessed first before we can write a fitness prescription. So you have to advise the patients first. And then agree with the patient that there are specific goals. Not everybody is going to be successful at these goals, but agree that fitness is something we want to incorporate into our regimen. And the fifth is assist. So we want to provide strategies to maintain levels of fitness and talk about what happens if you falter and you rebound. So some assisting devices are pedometers. So I looked on Walmart's website. A pedometer is not an expensive piece of equipment. It is $6 or $7 or maybe $20 for a watch that's not even Bluetooth but is a step counter. Your phone is not good enough because you don't have your phone on with you, on your person with every single step. So a very inexpensive counter of your movement. And tracking, where are we starting? Is a person more sedentary? Are they more active? Usually people are about 3,000 to 4,000 steps a day.
Okay.
A goal might be 10,000 steps a day. And that's 5 miles, because 2,000 steps a day is technically a mile, though I think it's probably a little more than that, but 2,000 steps a day in the research that I looked into, and that's 100 calories burned. Our goal might be 10,000, but if you're starting at 1,700, you're not going to get there in a week, in 10 days.
That's right.
So we need to have a prescription about how to increase before we get injured. And so patients who track tend to do better. They're following their regimen, they're getting up to a certain goal at a certain time, and a pedometer is inexpensive and an easy piece of equipment to incorporate into an activity regimen. And we all know the benefits of exercise. Improving muscle stability, improving flexibility, improving risk of heart disease and blood pressure, improving risk of diabetes, near and dear to my heart, decreasing risk of certain malignancies, breast, lung, kidney, stomach, and the list goes on. Improving bone strength, and we talked about that with falls and osteoporosis, so our osteoporosis patients should be mobile. It improves mental health. You feel better after you've moved. So it is a prescription for an improved sense of well-being. And it improves the risk of dementia, too. Patients who are walking actually do better when they're losing their memory.
Okay. Good.
So physical activity guidelines. It is well written in multiple divisions of medicine that there are certain amount of activity that we should ask patients to get to. And they say it's about 150 minutes in a week. And we talked about this, I think, in lifestyle, too. 30 minutes, 5 times a week is basically what we're asking people to do at the minimum.
Yep.
And in 1,440 minutes a day, we're asking you for 30. But there are greater benefits, even exponential benefits from more if patients can do more, 300 minutes a week. But that's an hour, 5 times a week. And in a daily grind, in your work schedule, and your family schedule, and your social schedule, that is sometimes hard to do. So at a minimum, we want to be realistic, trying to get in 30 minutes 5 times a week. All the steps count, too. So that's why monitoring what we're doing, how we're clicking, are we standing at our desk? Are we, moving from car to building to grocery store to laundromat, et cetera, all that counts.
Yeah.
So getting fit, spring, renewal, getting out there, the days are longer. You see it in the park. I mean, that path on the Avenue of the Pines is packed with people on a sunny, nice day, bundled to the nines, because when it hits 49 degrees around here, we think we've hit the jackpot. But spring is the time to get into that regimen.
Yeah.
All my information comes from the Obesity Medicine Association Fundamentals of Obesity Treatment Physical Activity. Physical activity section. So as the planet begins to renew, we should too. We should get out there. So, Charlie, tell me how Saratoga is going to open up for the spring and summer.
Well, what I thought I would talk about today, I do want to piggyback obviously on spring, but what I was thinking back was, let's take ourselves back to the 1800s. And in the 1800s, we're going to be the number 1 tourist destination in the United States. We're going to have some of the largest hotels in the world in Saratoga. And they're going to open about the first week in June. So what's going on in Saratoga in the spring? They're getting ready. I mean, Saratoga right now is getting ready. I know, talking with business owners, and everybody's gearing up. Everybody's trying to fulfill staffing requirements and everything else. We all know those things. Restaurants are adjusting menus and things like that. But in the old days, they weren't
physically opening up.
Yes.
Yeah, windows and doors
and hundreds and thousands of hotel rooms that had been put to bed probably about the first week in October at the latest. And the water had been drained down, and the ballrooms had been kind of covered up a little bit, but all that had to be done. And the other thing is, you've got to keep in mind, it depends on where in the 1800s you're talking, but the population of the city isn't that huge. I mean, you get back around 1820, 1815, maybe you got 2,000 people that live in the whole city. By the time you get to the end of the century, it's probably closer to 9,000. But you're taking care of 50,000 people. Everybody worked.
All hands on deck.
Yeah, and I joked with you a while ago about a story that we found, and I'm sorry I can't verify the exact date and everything, but this was an article that showed up on a Monday in the Saratogian, and the article was entitled "Superintendent Makes Announcement." Now this is on a Monday, and it was in April. It was mid-April, right about now where we're filming. And I was amazed. I was blown away by this because I'm going through doing research, and I find this, and because I have been a former teacher, I was like, well, what's he saying? And it says, the weather this year has been abnormally warm. People are coming. We're opening the hotels. So here's the announcement. Wednesday's the last day of school. Thursday's graduation. Friday, everybody should go to work. And I think that's exactly what happened in every case. The kids went to work, the adults went to work, and they did a myriad of jobs. And one of the things that you've got to remember is we had to feed all these people. And you think, how hard can that be? It was hard. Because we've got the train after 1832 that's going to be a pretty helpful thing to bring seafood from Boston and other things up from New York, etc.
But we weren't growing anything in April yet.
No, but they were going to plant.
They were going to plant it, but how are you going to feed them in April, right?
Well, yeah, and that becomes a little bit of a logistics problem, but I would think, this is just my guess, that even though it was somewhat warm then, the numbers weren't crushing in April that year, but they were still going to start to open. But you kind of look at what did people do. Everybody in town did something. Kids were dipper boys and girls. They shined shoes. Everybody went to work, and they all made money. And then people have asked us constantly, what happens in the off season? Well, they kind of took a breath because the summers were very hectic here, just like they are now. And you had some people that were in the trades that were going to be upgrading the hotels, putting on additions. They were going to fix plumbing, whatever, over the course of the winter. But there were a lot of people that were basically putting their businesses to bed and then trying to survive throughout the winter on what they had made over the summer. So a lot of activities. And spring in Saratoga in the 1800s would have meant, let's get going because they're coming. And the hotels are going to be the big anchor for us. And by that I mean this. You go downtown, go down on Broadway right now, and you've got a myriad of restaurants. You say, okay, what do we want to eat tonight? Where do we want to go? Back in the day, that was not the common thing. It was the American plan in the hotels, which meant you paid for your hotel room, but it came with breakfast, lunch, and dinner included, all for $2.50 a day, you know? So,
you can't get a gallon of gas for $2.50 a day.
All right, you bring up a tough subject there, Christine, but still, I mean, for that time, okay, it was a little bit of money, etc., but they weren't going someplace else. If they had paid, they're staying and eating all three meals there. So there wasn't that big flush of, well, we got to open 50 restaurants or anything else. It was open up the hotels. They were more like cruise ships. They were more like the modern day cruise ships.
All-encompassing and,
yes.
You know, in those hotels, you know, they fascinate me. You know, when you look at the old pictures and the prints and stuff, I mean, thousands of rooms and ballrooms that are bigger than football fields, and you know, to think about that in the modern scheme of Saratoga, it just doesn't fit, you know. But it's so massive to, you know, think about what it must have cost to heat a place like that and to get it ready. And you know, you talk about getting ready for the summer, like you said, it would take them months because they had to open the place, they had to get it ready. I mean, it's phenomenal history. It really is.
And one of the things you just touched on was heating. Actually, the key was they didn't want to heat it. So
Yeah.
as soon as it got cold enough and the
Door
bird-
shut.
and the bird bath was freezing out in the courtyard or whatever, it was time to close. So they didn't even have hot running water in most of the rooms.
Wow.
But let me bring this up on my phone. This is an article that showed up on August of 1892, and it was in the Saratogian again, and it was a list of the food necessary to run the hotel, United States Hotel restaurant for one day. Okay, buckle up. 700 quarts of milk, 400 dozen eggs, 500 pounds of butter, 160 pounds of turtle to be made into soup. Let's see, 60 pounds of salmon. Let's see, 100 and some odd pounds of bluefish. 340 chickens a day. Unstated amounts of cuts of beef, lamb, and pork. 10 barrels of potatoes, 2,000 ears of corn, 4,000 tea biscuits, 800 little desserts, and 220 quarts of ice cream. One hotel, one day.
How much beer?
Well, that wasn't on the list. I'm sure we could research further and
Yeah,
find that,
wow.
Brian.
Yeah.
But, I mean, those numbers are staggering.
Yeah.
And that's not the biggest hotel. So you start looking at what's everybody going to do? They're gearing up because not only, like we said, they've got to open, they've got to prepare, but they've also got to get their own system down. Some people in Saratoga were fishermen. They went out and tried to catch as many trout and then sold them every day. Some of them herded different animals into the lower levels of the hotel every morning from their farm, and they were slaughtered down there. And that's when usually the bands played a little louder in the morning.
So they're not hearing the screams of the animals?
Yeah.
And,
Oh, Lord.
But all that was of the day, and you didn't have mechanical refrigeration until later.
Right.
So as a result, you were doing this with ice. It had to be refreshed all the time. You look at a lot of places today, and you go, okay, they got a delivery of frozen food and blah, blah, blah. Well, they didn't have that kind of help back then. So what were they doing in the spring? They were getting ready because it was going to make sure that they had success for the whole summer, which would have been, again, June through probably mid-September at least. And the number of hotel rooms were staggering.
Yeah.
So it was.
And people stayed for weeks.
Oh, that's
That
it.
was the other thing.
See, we really are very lucky because we get the second rail line in New York State in 1832. It's going to start to get better for people to get here, and our numbers explode. But prior to that, it was hard to get here. So when you got here, you had spent maybe 3 weeks to come up by sailing ship from, let's say, Mobile, Alabama. Around Florida, you land in New York Harbor, then you take a steamboat up the Hudson, and then the last part from Albany to Saratoga by coach, stagecoach, took 8 hours.
From Albany to Saratoga, wow.
8 hours. Now, think about it. Unpaved roads,
Yep.
the coaches were what they were, and I've read these accounts from people in Mobile coming up, and this one woman accounted that the sail all around Florida and everything was very tough on her, and then the steamboats weren't bad, but the easiest part was the 8-hour carriage ride up to Saratoga. And I'm thinking, bumpy roads. She might have been going north or south, but her body parts got to be going east and west.
Yeah.
I mean, it can't be fun. And she thought in the whole look
That
back
was
on
that was the easiest part to get here.
Yes, yeah. So all I'm saying is that when they got here, they didn't say,
Let's
"Okay,
turn
well,
around in a day or two.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Long weekend.
Yeah.
So really, that's the downfall of the hotels. We build for people to stay the entire season.
Yep.
They don't fill after a while because the automobile destroys that. So they're off to other places. We've overbuilt, little Darwinian economics. The hotels are going to be torn down and rebuilt into smaller, more efficient. Think about this. You go out sometime, like to a Holiday Inn, a Hilton, a Hyatt or whatever, 125 rooms, 150 rooms in a place, something like that. I mean, the Grand Union was over 1,000 counting the cottages. United States was close to 750, something like that.
Yeah.
Incredible numbers. And it was one after another after another. You go right down the list of hotels. So everybody worked, everybody did something, and we were gearing up for it. So thank you for listening.
Well, I wanted to ask you real quick. So the hotels were one thing, but I'm curious about these cottages because I read that like the Diamond Jim Brady's, they wouldn't stay. They would have their own personal. Were these right on Broadway? Were they a lot of them by the lake, or where were they kind of spread out, or where was?
They were all in the back courtyards of the hotels.
Okay.
Now you got Grand Union occupied 7 acres. The United States is maybe 6.5. It's close to 7, but they had huge courtyards, and they were perfect for cottages. The Grand Union had a very strict policy. At 11 o'clock, they locked all the doors. They didn't want, as they would say, undesirables to come in. Tom Wynn was the head of security at the hotel for a couple, 3 decades. And his guys would circulate and make sure that the hotel proper was locked down.
Yep.
And you weren't going to bring somebody in, you weren't going to do anything. But the cottages weren't patrolled.
Okay.
So a lot of times what you find is the people that opted for a cottage, which was sometimes 10 times
The price of a room.
it was because they wanted their privacy. They wanted the ability to come and go and
Yep.
have friends come and go.
Sure.
And the one thing I'll leave you with, which has been kind of interesting for me, in our archives, we've got a lot of the hotel registers. So picture yourself, you're checking in Saratoga in the 1800s. You walk in the lobby, you say you want a room. They take that big book and swing it around and put a pen in your hand. You got to put your name in, who you're traveling with, and where you're from. That's all it's there. And it's great because you go through page after page, and it's each day of the summer for a year. And you say, oh, they came from this state. They came from this country. So that's neat.
Mm-hmm.
But I found that a lot of the men came with their nieces. So a lot of the ones that came with their nieces chose to stay in the cottages. So I don't know what was going on myself, but
Were they really their nieces? Is kind of what we wonder, you know?
Right, that's I think what we're
who
getting
am I to
at.
draw the, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
But remember, we had a Tiffany's in the first floor of the Grand Union that in approximately 3 to 4 months outsold the Tiffany's in New York.
Wow.
So I think the nieces needed a lot of jewelry too.
Yeah.
It's just a theory. We'll have to work on that later, but
Interesting stuff. Yeah.
thanks for asking. So.
Sure.
All right, Brian. So it's spring.
It's spring.
It's racing
so,
season.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, when spring comes around, the attention turns to the Kentucky Derby naturally. And you know, even though we're in Saratoga, quite a ways away, it's a big deal here with a lot of events and things that lead up to it. But I kind of want to talk a little bit about the process of getting to the Kentucky Derby because people only follow racing casually and just tune in for the Derby and the Belmont, the Breeders' Cup, you know. Well, how do these horses get here? And it's a very interesting process. And, you know, it kind of starts when these horses are 2 years old for most of them. You have some 3-year-olds that get on the trail late, but in earnest, you have races that start even at Saratoga the summer before. On closing day, we have a race called the Hopeful, and it's known as the Hopeful because you're hopeful that your horse will show some promise and be able to get to those classics the next spring. And then it goes into the fall, and you have races at Keeneland and Belmont, and the Breeders' Cup Juvenile is really the first points race that gets you onto the trail for the Derby. The point system has kind of changed over the years. It used to be, to get to the Kentucky Derby, there's 20 slots in the gate to get the best 23-year-olds in the world have the opportunity to go to the Kentucky Derby. And in a number of years, it was based upon your earnings in the stakes races. So if you get into a big race and you win it, you're probably going to have the earnings. But Churchill Downs a few years ago set up a system. So all these races throughout the country, whether it's a prep at Santa Anita in California, or the fairgrounds, or down at the Florida Derby, all these different tracks, they have these ways where you get to these races, the prep races, and you earn your way into the Kentucky Derby. And it's still sorting itself out right now. As you go through the spring, the points get bigger, the value of the races get bigger, and the competition gets stronger. So you start out at, Aqueduct in January, or one of the early level races, down in Florida, and then they build up. And now we're at these races where they're worth 100 points each. And if you win any of these, you're going to get in the Kentucky Derby.
That's right.
So we just had the Florida Derby, which was a 100-point race. We just had the Arkansas Derby. And now this weekend coming up here is the biggest three, the final big weekend of getting into the Kentucky Derby. So you have the Wood Memorial at Aqueduct. you have the Santa Anita Derby out of Santa Anita, and you have the Bluegrass Stakes at Keeneland. So it's these three major races, and all these contenders are sorting out their rankings, their positions, and if they have a good performance, they finish first or second, they're going to get into that starting gate. So it's an interesting process. The trainers are always looking for the best spots because they don't want to have the top. They don't want to go against their own. Like if you're Todd Pletcher, one of his top trainers, and you've got 5 or 6 horses on the Derby Trail, you've got to spread your horses out because you don't want them knocking each other off.
Yeah.
It's a shell game with all these top trainers, the Chad Browns and the Asmussens. They're splitting their horses between New Orleans and Oaklawn Park in Arkansas and California, and
they don't want to run them against each other
against
in the same race,
right?
because
you're going to
need the winner.
You need the winner, or you need a top 2 or 3, and you've got to build these points up as you get there. So the process of getting to the Derby, I think, is almost as interesting as the race itself. You have all these different stories that play out, and as you get closer, you also have the jockeys who have to make these big decisions. If you're one of the Ortiz brothers or John Velasquez or Mike Smith or Joel Rosario, in the prep series, you're riding a bunch of different horses, and your agents have got to try to get you on the best one. And it's also, it can be drama in years too, because if you've got a relationship with a trainer that you ride 20 or 30 horses for this guy over the course of a meet, but you say, well, I think this guy's got a better horse, I'm going to go with this one, you're jeopardizing a relationship. So there's a lot of factors that go into this, and it's an interesting process because along the Derby Trail you'll see horses that these owners come to the sales and they pay millions of dollars for them, and then you have the stories that come out of nowhere, a horse that 2 or 3 guys went in on and they spent 10 grand on, so it's a very democratic system. You can spend all the money in the world, but it's not going to buy you that. Your trainer has to do the job, your jockey has to do the job, and the horse has to do the job. So it's a very interesting process. In this final prep weekend, there's a couple more races after, but these are the 3 final main ones. There's a big broadcast on NBC they'll take you to all 3 of these tracks and get you right up there, and it's a real fascinating process. And then the Kentucky Derby, as you know, they call it the most exciting 2 minutes in sports for a reason. Every year you've got the Super Bowl and the World Series and all these things. More people attend the Kentucky Derby in person than any other sporting event in the country. You're going to have 165 to 175,000 people on the grounds of Churchill Downs for the Derby, and it's an incredible day, and it's something that we look forward to every year. And
have you been?
I've been to the Derby once. I've been to the track a number of times. It's an experience.
Like going to Saratoga. I mean,
this is different in a lot of ways, because it's one day. Like Saratoga is an experience for a season. Churchill Downs is a nice track and everything, but they've only got a couple of really big days. The rest of the time, you can go to Churchill Downs on an average day, and there's a few thousand people there, but this place is so massive that it's cavernous. When you just have that few people there. Saratoga every day you've got even during the week you've got 15,000-20,000 people there. The weekends are 50,000. So, but Churchill Downs on Derby Day, there's nothing like it. I mean, most people go in, you don't even get a good view of the race. It's just you're there for the experience. You see the infield there's probably 20,000 people just in the infield alone watching it.
On screen, because you're not going to see anything.
Right.
Anyways.
I mean, it's you're going there for the atmosphere and the mint juleps and the big hats and everything. But as far as racing, this is what people look forward to in the spring. The Roses, and then you're into the series. You've got the Preakness 2 weeks later. Yeah. And then the Belmont 3 weeks after that. And while this is all going on, Saratoga's starting to come to life. As we talked about this renewal here, the Oklahoma training track opens in mid-April. Right when we're in the prep season, and you've got the trainers that'll start to trickle in, and as the months progress, more and more of this horse population will come. But the first day of the Oklahoma training track, you're going to see Jimmy Bond's going to have horses over there. You're going to see some of the New York trainers that you're familiar with, and even the big guys who are off in Kentucky and these other places. They're going to have some of their assistants here, getting people ready. It's like you talk about a renewal. They're getting the barns ready. They're going out on the track. They're getting the horses ready for the summer. So it's a real exciting experience as we get to spring.
Yeah.
When does Oklahoma open up? It's
usually around April 15th or 16th every year. So, they and you go out there that first day, and there'll just be a handful of horses, but it varies each year depending on when the ground thaws and when they get all the things up. But it's usually mid-April that they open it up. So, and when you see that, you know that we're just a few months away from the big stuff here.
I know. I love stopping there on my way, something in the early morning, just to take a look and a shot over there. Yeah, it's good. Really good stuff. Yeah, I get real excited as we get closer to the Derby, so it's all good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. Living in Saratoga. Living the dream, right?
Yep, we've passed March. We're into April. We are days are longer and warmer. We're looking forward to racing. We're opening up Saratoga in some different ways now than we did, 200 years ago.
But let me make this point. Maybe I should have made it earlier. We're not a lot different. I mean, we're still, a destination place and everything. I mean, we're a 12-month destination now rather than just a summer. But we're a lot like we were then. It's just we have the effects of there's cars, there's trains, there's help, there's refrigeration. So you take some of
the schedule's pretty similar, though.
Oh, my God, yeah. And that's what's so funny because people will say to you, well, gee, in the old days, it's like it's the same as the new days. It's kind of the same thing. People are going to come. Yeah. And they love the track, too. So,
Well, thank you, gentlemen.
You're
That's
welcome.
it for this session of Health History Horses. Stay tuned for the next one.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you.